My brother's kids banged on my door at 2 a.m. Their parents locked them out again. So I taught him a lesson he'll never forget. Hey Reddit, never thought I'd be one of those people posting family drama online. But this situation got so completely messed up that I need to get it off my chest and maybe warn others who might be in similar situations. My brother kept locking his kids out of the house in the middle of the night, and they'd show up at my door crying, freezing, and terrified. After months of watching this pattern escalate, I finally made sure he'd never pull that stunt again. Here's the whole story of how it went down. I'm 34, single, work as an electrician doing mostly commercial jobs around the city. Office buildings, warehouses, retail spaces, that kind of thing. I own a small 2-bedroom house in a decent middle-class neighborhood where people actually mow their lawns, take care of their properties, and nobody blasts music at 3 a.m. or leaves broken cars rusting in driveways. It's quiet, predictable, safe. Exactly what I wanted after years of apartment living with paper-thin walls, upstairs neighbors who sounded like they were training for MMA fights at midnight, and people who thought personal space and consideration for others were just polite suggestions rather than basic human decency. Bought the house 5 years ago when I was 29. Saved up for years, working overtime whenever I could get it, skipping vacations and eating cheap meals to build that down payment. The neighborhood's older but well-maintained tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes during the day, people who wave when you drive past. My house is nothing fancy. Built in the 1970s, needs some updates, but it's solid. I've been slowly renovating it myself, room by room, using the skills I picked up on job sites and from watching countless YouTube tutorials late at night. My brother Tyler is 38, married to a woman named Christina, and they've got 2 kids, Emma, who's 8, and Logan, who's 6. On paper, they look like a normal suburban family. Nice house, 2 cars, the whole package. But behind closed doors, complete disaster. Tyler and I grew up in the same house but turned out completely different. I learned early that if you want something, you work for it. He learned that if you complain loud enough, someone else handles your problems. Our parents enabled him constantly, always making excuses for his laziness and poor decisions. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern was set. I was the responsible one. He was the golden child who could do no wrong. When Tyler married Christina 7 years ago, I knew it would be a train wreck. She's one of those people who thinks having kids is like getting a puppy. Fun until you realize they require actual work. They had Emma right away, then Logan 2 years later, and suddenly reality hit that children need constant attention, supervision, and care. The problem started small. Tyler and Christina would complain at family gatherings about how exhausting parenting was, how they never got time alone anymore. But instead of actually parenting and creating structure, they seemed to resent the kids for existing and needing things. I started noticing concerning things at family dinners. The way Tyler would snap at Emma for asking simple questions. How Christina would ignore Logan when he tried to show her something. The kids would sit quietly with tablets while adults talked, and if they made noise, they'd get harsh looks and be told to go away. But I didn't say anything. Wasn't my place. People handle stress differently. Maybe it would get better. They didn't get better. They got exponentially worse. The first incident that really opened my eyes happened on a Tuesday night in late September, about 6 months ago from now. I was deep asleep, actually having a decent dream for once, when someone started pounding on my front door at exactly 2:17 a.m., according to my phone. Not gentle knocking, not the doorbell, but full-on desperate panic pounding, like the house was actively on fire. And seconds mattered. I jolted awake with my heart racing, stumbled out of bed in my boxers and t-shirt, grabbed my phone to call the cops if this turned out to be some kind of home invasion or emergency, and carefully looked through the peephole expecting to see who knows what. Cops, firefighters, someone injured, anything but what was actually there. 2 small figures stood on my porch under the yellow glow of the porch light. My niece Emma and nephew Logan, both wearing thin pajamas, no coats, no shoes, just socks. Emma was holding Logan's hand while he openly sobbed, his whole little body shaking. I yanked the door open immediately, cold air rushing into my house. "What the heck? What are you 2 doing here at 2 in the morning?" Emma looked up at me with red, puffy eyes that had clearly been crying for a while. Her voice was small and scared. "Mom and Dad locked us out. We knocked and knocked on the door, but they won't open it. We don't know what to do." My blood went absolutely cold despite the chill from outside. It was 40 degrees according to my weather app. These kids were standing outside in thin cotton pajamas and socks, no protective clothing whatsoever, in the middle of the night, 3 blocks from their house. "Come inside right this second. Right now." I pulled them in, immediately closed the door against the cold, grabbed blankets from the closet, and got them wrapped up on my couch. Logan was shaking badly. I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from crying or both. His face was blotchy and wet with tears. Emma tried to act brave and composed, like she was the adult in this situation, but I could see the fear in her eyes. This 8-year-old kid was terrified and trying to hold it together for her younger brother. I got them situated with the blankets, turned up the thermostat, and sat down in front of them. Okay, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Emma took a shaky breath and explained the whole situation. They'd been watching TV in the living room around midnight, already way past when kids that age should be up on a school night. Their parents were in the master bedroom with the door closed as usual, not supervising, not checking on them. Emma had gotten hungry and went to the kitchen for a snack. When she came back through the living room, she noticed the front door was standing wide open. She went to close it because it was cold, and when she turned around, she realized her parents had come out and locked their bedroom door. She knocked and knocked, but they wouldn't respond. Then she realized Logan wasn't inside. He'd gone out to the backyard to check on their dog. They have this old retriever that sometimes sleeps in a doghouse outside. When Logan tried to come back in through the front door, it was locked. He tried the back door, also locked. Both kids ended up completely locked out of the house, every entry point secured. Parents not responding to doorbell, knocking, nothing. They'd walked 3 blocks to my house in the dark, in their pajamas, because they didn't know what else to do, and didn't know any neighbors well enough to knock on their doors at 2 a.m. Emma knew where I lived because she'd been here for a few birthday parties. So they walked, in the cold and dark, on empty streets, just 2 little kids trying to find safety. I called Tyler immediately, fighting to keep my voice calm, when what I really wanted to do was reach through the phone and shake some sense into him. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, voice groggy and irritated like I'd just interrupted something important. What? Your kids are at my house. You locked them out of the house. Long pause on his end. Then, with zero concern in his voice, what are you talking about? Emma and Logan are sitting on my couch right now wrapped in blankets. They walked 3 blocks to my house at 2 in the morning because you and Christina locked them out of the house. We didn't lock them out. They must have gone outside to play or something and the door shut behind them. Kids do stuff like that. Tyler, Emma said you locked the bedroom door and wouldn't answer when they knocked. Logan was locked outside trying to get back in. It's 40 degrees out and they're in thin pajamas. She's exaggerating like kids do. We were asleep. We didn't hear anything. Just send them home. Send them home? It's 2 a.m. They're in pajamas with no shoes, and they just walked 3 blocks in the cold because their parents locked them out. So drive them over then. I'm not getting out of bed for this. I have work in the morning. That's the moment I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't just some unfortunate accident or misunderstanding. He wasn't panicked, wasn't apologizing profusely, wasn't rushing over to get his kids or expressing any relief that they were safe. He was simply annoyed that I'd interrupted his sleep and was now making demands for his time and attention. I drove them back anyway because they needed to be home, needed their beds, needed their school clothes and backpacks for the next morning. The whole drive over, Emma just stared silently out the window, not saying anything while Logan fell asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from crying and walking and fear. This little 6-year-old kid who should have been safe in bed was instead traumatized and exhausted at 2:30 in the morning. Tyler answered his front door wearing just his boxers and an undershirt, looking irritated and impatient like we were inconveniencing him. Didn't thank me for bringing them home. Didn't apologize for what happened. Didn't check to see if the kids were okay. Didn't ask if they were cold or scared. Just took them by the shoulders, guided them inside, and shut the door in my face without another word. I stood there on his porch for a solid minute, just staring at that closed door, processing what had just happened. The complete dismissiveness, the total lack of concern for his children's safety and well-being, the casual way he dismissed their fear and my worry. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong in that house, and those kids were paying the price for their parents' failures. Drove home and couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, kept thinking about Emma's scared face when she first appeared on my porch, about Logan crying, about how 2 small children had walked 3 blocks in the dark to find help because the people who were supposed to protect them had literally locked them out in the cold. The images kept replaying in my head on an endless loop. I told myself it was probably a one-time thing, a terrible mistake. Maybe Tyler had been confused or half asleep. Maybe there was some explanation that made sense. People screw up sometimes. Parents make mistakes. Maybe this was just one bad night, and everything would be fine going forward. I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night, it happened again. This time it was 1:45 a.m. when the pounding started. Same desperate banging on my front door. Same two kids on my porch. Same thin pajamas and bare feet. October now. Temperatures dropping into the 30s at night. Getting dangerously cold for kids dressed for indoor comfort. They did it again, Emma said quietly when I opened the door, her voice flat and resigned like she'd already accepted this as normal. I brought them inside immediately, got them wrapped in blankets and warming up, and this time I was prepared with detailed questions. I needed to understand exactly what was happening and why. Tell me everything that happened tonight, from the very beginning. Don't skip any details. Emma explained in that tired, defeated voice that they'd both been in bed, actually asleep for once, at a reasonable hour. Logan woke up around 1 a.m. needing to use the bathroom urgently, but when he tried their bedroom door, it was locked from the outside. He knocked for their parents, called out for them, but nobody came. He really couldn't hold it anymore, and had an accident right there by the door, which woke Emma up. They both started knocking louder then yelling, then pounding on the door, trying desperately to get their parents to come unlock it. Nothing. Complete silence from the other side. Emma said she could hear the TV on in the living room, could see the light under their bedroom door, absolutely knew someone was awake out there. But nobody came to help. Nobody responded to their desperate calls. Eventually, Emma had figured out how to use a hanger to pop the window screen off their bedroom window. They both climbed out, and this is the part that made my stomach drop. They climbed out a second-story window, dropped down into the bushes below that fortunately broke their fall, and then walked to my house because the front door was locked from the inside and they couldn't get back in any other way. A second-story window. These kids, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, had climbed out a second-story window in the middle of the night in the cold because their parents had deliberately locked them in their room and wouldn't let them out even for basic bathroom needs. This time, I took extensive photos with my phone. Pictures of their pajamas still slightly damp from Logan's accident. Their bare feet, dirty from walking on sidewalks. The timestamp on my phone clearly showing 1:45 a.m. I asked Emma to tell me the whole story again while I recorded video, getting her statement documented. She looked completely exhausted, but answered every single question I asked with heartbreaking detail. I called Tyler again, and this time the conversation was even worse because he didn't even pretend to be surprised or concerned. "They're at your place again, huh?" Not, "Oh no, are they okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just casual acknowledgement like this was becoming routine. "You locked them in their bedroom, Tyler. They had to climb out a second-story window to get out. We lock their door at night so they don't wander around the house and get into stuff or make noise that keeps us awake. It's called establishing boundaries and structure. Maybe if you actually had kids of your own, you'd understand how parenting works. Tyler, they climbed out a second-story window. They could have been seriously injured. Logan needed to use the bathroom and you locked him in the room with no way out. That's their choice to climb out. They could have just stayed in their room quietly and gone back to sleep like normal kids. Logan's 6 years old. He can learn to hold it until morning." The casual cruelty in his voice, the complete lack of empathy or concern, made me want to reach through the phone and physically shake him until his brain started working properly. But I kept my voice level and calm, told him I was bringing the kids back home, and hung up before I said something I'd regret and make the situation worse for Emma and Logan. Drove them home once again. Tyler didn't even bother coming to the door this time. Christina answered instead, wearing pajamas and looking annoyed that she had to pause whatever streaming show she was binge-watching. She took the kids without saying a single word to them or me and shut the door in my face just like Tyler had done before. That's when I made the decision to start seriously documenting everything. Went to the store the next morning and bought a dedicated notebook just for this. Started writing down exact dates, times, detailed descriptions of exactly what the kids told me had happened, took more photos, kept everything organized. Because somewhere deep down, I knew this pattern wasn't going to stop on its own, and eventually, I was going to need ironclad proof of what was happening to build a case for intervention. The third incident happened 3 weeks later, and this one was somehow even worse than the first two. School night, 11:30 p.m., and only Emma showed up at my door this time. She was alone, shivering, arms wrapped around herself trying to stay warm. "Where's Logan?" I asked immediately, looking past her expecting to see him following. "Still inside. They only locked me out this time." The story she told made my blood boil. She'd asked for a glass of water after her official bedtime because she was genuinely thirsty. Her dad had yelled at her to go back to bed and stop bothering them. She'd explained politely that she really was thirsty and just needed some water. That's when he'd grabbed her roughly by the arm, marched her straight to the front door, physically pushed her outside in her pajamas, and locked the door behind her. Just like that. No warning, no second chance, just immediate punishment for the crime of being a thirsty 8-year-old child. Emma had knocked and knocked on that door, pleading to be let back in. Nobody answered. She could hear Logan crying inside the house, could hear her dad's voice yelling at Logan to shut up and go to sleep. So she'd walked the 3 blocks to my house alone in the dark because she had literally nowhere else to go. I documented everything again with the same careful attention to detail. Photos of her standing there in thin pajamas with goosebumps on her arms. Video of her explaining exactly what happened in her own words. Wrote down every single detail in my notebook with times, dates, direct quotes. The evidence file was growing. Then I called Tyler for the 3rd time, and the conversation went exactly as badly as expected. Your daughter is at my house again. You physically shoved her outside and locked the door behind her because she asked for a glass of water. She wouldn't stop whining and nagging about being thirsty when we'd already told her it was bedtime. Maybe a few minutes outside by herself will teach her to appreciate what she has and follow the rules we set. It's 40 degrees outside, Tyler. She's 8 years old. She's in thin pajamas. She's fine. Stop babying her and acting like she's fragile. Kids today are too soft because everyone treats them like they'll break. A little cold air never hurt anybody. I'm bringing her back right now, and then you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about what's been happening in your house. Don't bother coming inside. And I'm done listening to your sanctimonious lectures about parenting when you don't have kids and don't understand what it's like. He actually hung up on me. Just ended the call mid-conversation because he didn't want to hear anything I had to say. I drove Emma back to their house, but this time I didn't just drop her at the door like I'd done before. This time I rang that doorbell and kept ringing it until Tyler answered, looking even more annoyed than usual. Then I pushed right past him into his house without asking permission or waiting for an invitation, walked into his living room, and found Logan curled up on the couch with red, swollen eyes and tear-stained cheeks, clearly having cried himself into exhaustion. I turned to face Tyler and Christina, who'd come out from wherever she'd been hiding. This stops right now. Tonight. You cannot keep locking your kids out of the house in the cold. It's dangerous, it's cruel, it's going to get someone seriously hurt, and it's completely unacceptable. Tyler crossed his arms defensively. It's my house and my kids. I'll parent them however I see fit. You don't get a say in this. What you're doing isn't parenting. It's neglect at best and abuse at worst. Get out of my house right now before I call the cops on you for trespassing. Christina appeared fully in the hallway then, adding her voice to the confrontation. You really need to leave. You're not their parent. You don't have kids. You don't get any say in how we choose to raise our children. This is none of your business. I looked at both of them standing there, Tyler defiant and justified, Christina with that perpetually irritated expression, and realized these people had no business being responsible for other human beings. This isn't over. Not even close, I told them both, and then left before the situation escalated further. Drove home and spent the next 2 hours researching everything I could find online about child protective services, mandatory reporting laws for concerned family members, and what exactly constitutes legal child neglect and endangerment in our state. Turned out that repeatedly locking young children out of the house in cold weather, especially at night, checked pretty much every single box for serious endangerment. The definitions were crystal clear. What Tyler and Christina were doing wasn't just bad parenting or questionable discipline. It was textbook neglect that put the kids in genuine danger. But I hesitated. They were my brother's kids. Family. And calling CPS felt like crossing a line you can never come back from. Like dropping a bomb on family relationships that would destroy everything permanently. I kept hoping somehow Tyler would come to his senses, that he'd realize what he was doing and stop before things got worse. Things got worse. The 4th incident was the absolute breaking point that forced my hand. Mid-November, early winter really settling in, temperature dropped down to 28 degrees overnight, well below freezing. Actually dangerous weather for anyone outside without proper clothing. I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to that familiar, desperate pounding on my door. Both kids this time, Emma practically dragging Logan, who was barely conscious and couldn't walk properly on his own. Got them inside immediately, and Logan's skin was ice cold to the touch, like touching frozen meat. His lips had a distinct blue tinge to them. His skin was pale and waxy. He could barely speak, just making little whimpering sounds. Emma was crying hard, saying they'd been locked outside for over an hour, trying to stay warm, huddled together in the bushes along the side of the house. But it kept getting colder, and Logan started acting strange and couldn't stay awake. I didn't hesitate this time. Called 911 immediately. Told the emergency dispatcher I had 2 children with possible hypothermia who'd been deliberately locked out of their house by their parents. Ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Paramedics immediately went to work checking both kids' vital signs and core body temperatures. They determined Logan absolutely needed to go to the hospital to be properly monitored and treated because his body temperature was dangerously low. The paramedics asked their standard protocol questions about what had happened. Emma told them the complete truth. Their parents had locked them outside. They'd tried to get back inside but couldn't. They'd walked to my house, but it took much longer than usual because Logan kept having to stop and rest, and Emma had to help him walk. Hospital staff, I learned, are mandatory reporters by law. The absolute moment they heard the story about kids being deliberately locked outside in freezing weather by their own parents, they were legally required to contact Child Protective Services. The wheels were set in motion whether I was ready or not. Tyler showed up at the emergency room about 40 minutes later, not concerned or panicked, just absolutely furious that I'd called an ambulance and gotten CPS involved in what he considered private family business. Christina stayed home. Apparently couldn't even be bothered to drive to the hospital to check on her own kid who was being treated for hypothermia. That told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. "You had absolutely no right to do this," Tyler hissed at me in the hospital hallway while doctors were examining Logan in a room nearby. "No right at all to involve outside people in our private family matters. Your son has hypothermia, Tyler. He was locked outside in 28-degree weather wearing pajamas. What exactly did you expect me to do? Let him freeze? Bring him home like you always do and mind your own business. Now we've got CPS breathing down our necks and making our lives hell because you couldn't just handle things quietly within the family. Maybe if you and Christina didn't keep locking your kids outside in freezing weather, CPS wouldn't need to be involved. Ever think of that? They're completely fine. Stop being so dramatic about everything. You're making this into something it's not." A CPS caseworker arrived about an hour later. Professional woman in her 50s named Patricia, who clearly had years of experience dealing with exactly these kinds of situations. She interviewed Emma and Logan separately in private rooms, spoke extensively with the medical staff about their conditions and what they'd reported, reviewed the hospital treatment records, and then asked if she could talk to me. I showed her absolutely everything I'd been documenting. The notebook filled with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. All the photos I'd taken on my phone. The videos of the kids explaining in their own words what had happened each time. Months of careful documentation, proving beyond any doubt that this was an established pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents or misunderstandings. Patricia's face got progressively harder and more serious with each piece of evidence I showed her. She'd probably seen a lot of terrible things in her career, but this clearly still affected her. This is very serious neglect. These children are in real danger. This behavior is completely unacceptable and endangering. Tyler tried to minimize and deflect everything. Said the kids were exaggerating like kids do. Said they'd locked themselves out by accident and were making up stories. Said I was overreacting because I didn't have kids of my own and was poisoning CPS against him because of some personal grudge. Patricia wasn't buying any of it for even a second. "Mr. Wilson, I have extensive documentation from your brother showing this has happened at least 4 documented times over the past 2 months. I have hospital records right here showing your son was just treated for hypothermia. I have detailed statements from both children separately describing being locked out of the house repeatedly in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures. This isn't exaggeration, and this isn't accident. This is a clear, established pattern of child endangerment. They're my kids. I'm allowed to discipline them however I see fit. That's my right as their father. Not when that so-called discipline puts them at serious risk of injury or death. Locking young children outside in freezing weather wearing only pajamas is not discipline. It's abuse. And it stops right now. The word abuse just hung there in the air between them. Tyler's face turned red, but he couldn't actually argue against it because she was absolutely right, and he knew it. CPS formally opened an official investigation that same day. They conducted a surprise home visit the very next morning, interviewed both Tyler and Christina separately without allowing them to coordinate their stories, photographed every room in the house looking for evidence of neglect or danger, and talked to Emma and Logan's teachers at their elementary school. Turned out the teachers had already noticed concerning things they'd been quietly worrying about. Both kids frequently falling asleep in class, Emma hoarding snacks and food in her backpack, like she wasn't sure when she'd eat again. Logan being unusually anxious and scared about going home at the end of the school day. Within 1 week of intensive investigation, CPS had gathered enough evidence to formally recommend removing the children from the home temporarily, while the investigation continued, and the parents received mandatory intervention. Tyler and Christina would be required to complete comprehensive parenting classes, undergo regular unannounced home visits from CPS staff, attend counseling sessions, and demonstrate they could actually provide a consistently safe environment before the kids could potentially return. Tyler completely lost his mind when he got that news. Called me on my cell phone, literally screaming at the top of his lungs that I'd destroyed his family, that I'd turned CPS against him with lies and manipulation, that his kids were being stolen away from him because of my exaggerations and interference. I just let him yell and scream himself hoarse, then calmly said, "Your kids are being temporarily removed because you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather, because Logan ended up in the hospital being treated for hypothermia, because you showed absolutely zero concern for their safety or well-being, because teachers reported concerns about their behavior and condition. This isn't my fault. It's entirely yours. You did this to yourself. You're dead to me. You hear me? Dead. You'll never see these kids again. You're not family anymore." Then he hung up before I could respond. Fine by me. CPS needed emergency placement for Emma and Logan while everything got sorted out. They asked if I'd be willing to take them temporarily until they could either find an appropriate foster placement or Tyler completed all requirements to get them back. I said yes immediately without any hesitation. These kids desperately needed stability, structure, safety, and someone who actually gave a damn about them as human beings. I had the physical space in my house, I had a stable job with predictable income, and I had months of documentation proving I'd been the one consistently protecting them and looking out for their welfare all along. The CPS home visit took 2 days to arrange and complete. They checked every inch of my house, ran extensive background checks on me, interviewed my employer about my work history and reliability, talked to my neighbors about whether I was a responsible person. Everything came back completely clean. By the end of that week, Emma and Logan were officially placed in my temporary custody with CPS oversight. The first night they actually stayed at my house felt completely surreal, like I'd stepped into an alternate reality version of my life. I'd spent the previous 3 days frantically converting my home office into a proper bedroom for Emma. New bed, new dresser, cheerful bedding, posters on the walls. Set up Logan in my guest room with kid-appropriate furniture and toys. Went to Target and bought what felt like the entire children's section. New clothes in their sizes, school supplies, backpacks, winter coats, shoes, everything they needed. Emma cried herself to sleep that first night, not because she missed her parents or wanted to go back. She was scared they'd somehow show up and force her and Logan to return. She kept asking if the doors were locked, if Tyler could just break in and take them. I sat in the hallway right outside her room until she finally dozed off from exhaustion, promising her over and over that nobody would hurt her here, that she was safe now, that I wouldn't let anyone take them back. Logan adjusted faster, probably because he was younger and more resilient. The kid was 6 years old and just genuinely happy to be somewhere. He didn't have to constantly worry about being locked outside in the cold. He asked if he could have a snack whenever he wanted without permission. And when I told him yes, of course, help yourself, his entire face lit up like Christmas morning. Such a simple thing that most kids take for granted, but for him it was freedom. School became our new daily routine. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, make breakfast, pack their lunches with the foods they actually liked, drive them to school, then head to my work sites. Pick them up at 3 p.m., help them with homework at the kitchen table, make dinner, supervise bath time, read bedtime stories, all the normal kid stuff that should have been happening all along. It was absolutely exhausting, and I'd never worked harder in my life, but it felt right in a way my previous solitary existence never had. Tyler and Christina were required by court order to complete 12 full weeks of parenting classes, attend mandatory counseling sessions twice weekly, and undergo random unannounced home visits from CPS staff. They were allowed supervised visits with the kids every other weekend. Supervised meaning I had to be physically present the entire time to make sure nothing inappropriate happened. That first supervised visit was an absolute disaster and showed me everything I needed to know about whether they'd changed. Tyler spent the entire 2-hour visit complaining bitterly about how unfair the system was, how CPS had no right to take his kids away, how I'd ruined everything with my interference and exaggerations. He didn't ask Emma a single question about school or her friends, didn't play with Logan or show any interest in what he'd been doing, just wallowed in his own victim complex and sense of persecution. Christina was somehow even worse. She kept making passive-aggressive comments about how the kids looked perfectly fine and healthy, so clearly this whole thing was just blown way out of proportion and unnecessary. Emma sat rigidly silent the entire visit, not engaging, visibly uncomfortable. Logan played with toys in the corner, actively trying to ignore both his parents, like they were strangers he didn't want to interact with. When that visit finally ended, Logan immediately asked me if he had to go back with them. When I told him no, not today, you're staying with me, he visibly relaxed and his whole body language changed. That's the moment I knew with absolute certainty these kids were genuinely better off without their parents in their daily lives. CPS caseworker Patricia called me about a week later with updates on Tyler and Christina's progress through the required programs. Tyler had already missed 2 separate parenting classes without valid excuses and had shown up 30 minutes late to his individual counseling session. Christina had straight up refused to participate in role-playing exercises during the group parenting class, declaring they were stupid and pointless, and she didn't need strangers teaching her how to parent her own children. This isn't looking promising at all, Patricia admitted to me over the phone with clear frustration in her voice. In my experience, most parents in their situation are absolutely desperate to complete all requirements and get their children back as quickly as possible. They'll do anything, attend every session, follow every rule. But these two seem far more interested in being right and justified than in actually getting their kids back. That tells me a lot about their priorities. That's when I made my final decision. What would it take for me to petition for permanent custody instead of temporary? You'd need to file formal paperwork with the court. Given the circumstances, the children's current stable placement, and the parents' lack of progress, you'd likely have a very strong case. But you need to understand it would mean your brother and his wife permanently losing their parental rights. That's not something that gets reversed. They lost those rights the very first time they deliberately locked their kids outside at 2 a.m. in the cold. They just didn't realize it yet. Patricia didn't argue with my assessment. I hired a family law attorney who specialized in custody cases. Cost me $3,000 upfront plus ongoing fees. But it was worth every single penny to make sure Emma and Logan stayed permanently safe. The attorney reviewed all my extensive documentation, the detailed notebook, all the photos, the videos, the medical records from Logan's hospital visit for hypothermia. She told me it was genuinely one of the strongest, most well-documented cases of parental neglect she'd personally seen in her entire career. We filed for permanent custody. Tyler and Christina were officially served papers 3 weeks later. Tyler showed up at my house at 11 p.m. that same night, pounding on my door hard enough to wake the kids upstairs. I immediately went outside to deal with him, so Emma and Logan wouldn't hear the inevitable screaming and conflict. You're trying to steal my kids. That's what this is. Theft. I'm trying to protect them from you. There's a fundamental difference. They're my kids. You have absolutely no right to them. You gave up that right when you repeatedly locked them outside in freezing weather and one of them ended up in the hospital. Actions have consequences. That's discipline. Kids need firm boundaries and structure or they turn into spoiled brats. Kids need parents who don't actively endanger their lives. We went back and forth for 20 minutes. Tyler getting progressively more unhinged with each exchange, his voice getting louder, and his arguments more desperate. He eventually escalated to actual threats, saying he'd make me pay for what I'd done to his family, and I'd regret ever interfering. I pulled out my phone and started obviously recording video, which immediately shut him up. Nothing stops aggressive behavior faster than knowing it's being documented. You need to leave my property right now. You're violating the custody arrangement by being here and threatening me. Leave before I call the police. He finally left, but not before putting his fist completely through my metal mailbox in a rage, leaving a massive dent. I immediately called the police, filed an official report, and added that incident and the video to my growing evidence pile. The court hearing was scheduled for February, 3 months away. 3 months of waiting while Emma and Logan continued adjusting to their new stable life with me. They absolutely thrived during that time, in ways I'd never seen before. Their grades improved dramatically. Emma started actually smiling and laughing. Logan stopped having frequent nightmares about being locked outside in the cold. Their teachers called me multiple times, amazed by the transformation. They said they'd never witnessed such a dramatic positive improvement in students before. Emma went from barely scraping by with C's and D's to consistently getting A's and B's. Logan stopped hoarding food in his backpack and desk, stopped being anxious and jumpy, actually started participating in class discussions and activities. Tyler and Christina technically finished the required parenting classes under duress and threat of losing their kids permanently, but they clearly hadn't actually changed anything fundamental about their attitudes or behavior. During the supervised visits, they'd constantly complain about the requirements, about CPS interfering, about me destroying their family, but they never actually engaged meaningfully with Emma and Logan. It was like they viewed the kids as possessions they'd been robbed of rather than actual human beings they'd endangered. Court day finally arrived. Both sides presented evidence. My attorney systematically laid out the entire documented timeline of neglect, showed the hospital records from Logan's hypothermia treatment, presented the CPS reports and findings, displayed all the documentation I'd carefully gathered over months. Tyler's attorney tried weakly arguing that, yes, mistakes had been made, but the parents had now completed all required classes and deserved another chance to prove themselves. The judge asked to speak privately with Emma and Logan. Emma spoke clearly and confidently, saying she felt safe living with me and definitely didn't want to go back. Logan, 6 years old, told the judge directly that he liked his new room at my house and didn't want to have to sleep outside in the cold anymore. That simple statement from a 6-year-old hit the courtroom like a bomb. The judge asked Logan to clarify. He matter-of-factly explained how at his old house he'd sometimes had to sleep outside when they locked him out, but at my house he always had a warm bed and never had to be cold or scared. The judge's face went hard. She reviewed the evidence, asked clarifying questions to both attorneys, then made her ruling. Based on the clearly documented pattern of serious neglect, the medical evidence of endangerment, the children's own testimony about their experiences, and the parents' failure to demonstrate genuine change in their attitudes or behavior, I am granting permanent custody to the uncle. Parental rights of Tyler and Christina Wilson are hereby permanently terminated. Tyler absolutely exploded in the courtroom, screaming and yelling so loudly he had to be physically escorted out by bailiffs while screaming about corruption, kidnapping, and injustice. Christina just sat there looking annoyed and put out like this entire legal proceeding was nothing more than a massive inconvenience in her life rather than losing her children forever. That was it. Emma and Logan were officially, legally, permanently mine. We celebrated that night with ice cream and a movie marathon, just the three of us. Emma asked if this meant she'd never have to see her parents again unless she chose to. I told her that was exactly what it meant. Completely her choice, no pressure either way. She shook her head firmly, no. Logan asked if he could paint his bedroom any color he wanted, and I told him absolutely. We'd go pick out paint this weekend. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.